Hello and welcome back to another Dare to Game video. Today we are taking a look at Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon. For longtime viewers of the channel, this shouldn't be your first look, as I have covered this game in some detail in the past. But now it's getting exciting because the game is almost finished. They've just released the final 0.9 patch, which brings the entire first act into early access, so you can buy and play it now. Or for those waiting for the experience, the wait won't be long, as they have entered the bug fixing and polishing stage for the full release. The entire 3-act game, which will be coming out in Q2 of 2025. So if that's what you've been waiting for, we're getting close. But now, for those of you who have perhaps never heard of the game, or at least never looked into it, let's go through what this game is. For starters, it's being made by an indie studio from Poland by a small dedicated team of gamers. Their background is mostly in tabletop RPGs, and that shows in the classic RPG design that this game has. It also clearly draws a lot of inspiration from other classic video games, and if you're a fan of them, you'll likely pick it up pretty quick. Gameplay-wise, the game is very Elder Scrolls-esque. To certain extents, a Skyrim comparison would not be out of place, as the game has too modern a UI to be accurately compared to Oblivion or Morrowind. But there is a lot about this game that reminds me of the Elder Scrolls. For one thing, the basic combat triangle of ranged, melee, and magic makes its appearance in this game, and it does look a lot like Elder Scrolls, but is arguably a lot better. The weapons feel more weighty. There's timing-based blocking and parrying. The magic is one thing that Skyrim really sucks at, and even though I'm not a magic fan myself, this game does it a lot better than Skyrim ever did, as it actually has the potential to feel powerful and look cool, something the magic in Skyrim never achieved. Like I said, the melee is also a lot better than Skyrim's. It starts out as basic hack and slash, but as I said, the timing-based parries make the combat feel more impactful, and the weapons aren't floaty and weightless like they are in Skyrim. It's no Kingdom Come Deliverance, but it does feel like you shouldn't just spam attack and hold block, as doing that typically gets you killed. So arguably, the melee combat is probably right in that sweet spot of simple enough to pick up quickly, but complex enough to provide players with a rewarding skill gap. And ranged combat is of course a lot of fun as well. Yes, you absolutely can be a stealth archer in this game. It's viable, as the variety in bows and arrows is huge, as is the variety in armor choices, including light and quiet armor options that lend themselves to a ranger or even an assassin build. The bows also do a pretty good job at feeling powerful when you use them. For one thing, you can't just draw and hold all day, as there is a substantial stamina drain to them, which compounds the more powerful that they get. For another thing, the arrow speed is actually pretty decent. There's a little arrow leap as well, that at the moment I'm not sure if it's a side effect of a little unpolished jank, or if it's actually an intentional realism feature. But either way, I'm getting used to it. But overall, the combat is very free and unbridled. You can run sword and shield, two-handed weapons, dual-wield one-handed weapons. Hell, you can even dual-wield shields if you want. And you can carry multiple loadouts, so switching between a two-handed greatsword, a bow and arrow, and a sword and board is quick and allows for engaging and dynamic encounters with various enemy types. The art style of this game is not very Elder Scrolls-esque, at least in my opinion. This definitely falls nearer to the realm of dark fantasy. A lot of the surface level will appear to be fairly bog-standard fantasy RPG, but when you dig a little deeper or start encountering bosses, you'll start to see what appears to be a blend of the Dark Souls aesthetic and some Eldritch horror. Some of the stuff in this game is straight up gross, and some of it borders on horrifying. And on the other hand, you have undead shamblers, wolves, and regular old humans to fight or befriend as well. So the mix is definitely more aggressive than most games in the genre. The story design, again, reminds me a lot of the Elder Scrolls, especially Oblivion. I mean, you even start out in a prison and set your starting stats and playstyle through a conversation with a prison guard. The comparison there is fairly easy, but the whole story is very Oblivion-esque that way. There is a pretty solid balance of the clear, core, main storyline, which pulls you to the next geographic location and introduces you to the main players. But the world is absolutely littered with optional side content that you can engage with or ignore at your own free will. And much, if not most of it, exists fully independent of you. So a bounty flyer might be posted for you to pick up, and you will find the guy where it describes, but he will also be there before you pick up the poster. And you can kill him, take his stuff, and claim the bounty later if you want. The world feels like it doesn't just exist because you are there. And that is always a good design philosophy, in my opinion. As for story content, I'm not going to spoil it here, as I do find it to be fairly interesting and engaging narrative overall. But it is a dark retelling, or probably more accurately described as a reimagining of Arthurian legend. If you're familiar with King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, you'll likely recognize a lot of the character and location names in this game. And that's a lot of fun. However, other than a few similarities or consistencies in character traits, that's where the similarity ends, because this story is wholly unique. It takes place on the Isle of Avalon, but unlike in Arthurian Legend, where that is the resting place of the once and future king, in here it is the refuge of all his people, who he led there long ago to flee a plague. And obviously, there's a lot of magic and fantasy involved in this story, so if you're deciding whether or not this story is for you, remember, it's loosely based on Arthurian Legend, it has a quest design and writing inspiration that seems heavily influenced by the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, and it has a dark fantasy / eldritch horror art style and environment. The game is also super customizable. There is a fairly well fleshed out skill tree and progression system that has changed and improved a lot since the early stages of the game that I covered in the past. It's certainly nowhere near as cumbersome as Skyrim's, but it feels similar. Progression is based on usage and leveling, so if you want to improve your archery, you're going to need to fight enemies using a bow. If you want to improve your thievery, you're going to need to pick locks. If you want to improve your cooking skill, you will need to cook food, etc. But there are also skill and perk points that you can apply to give yourself a buff in numerous ways, and you gain these through leveling up your main level. The amount of unique and distinct clothing, armor, and weapons is also super impressive in this game. Now, my personal sense of style falls somewhere between real accurate medieval armor and high fantasy like The Lord of the Rings, so that limits me. That being said, there is still quite a bit of clothing, armor, and weapons in this game that are close enough to realistic that I don't mind wearing and or using them. But if you like fantasy, this game has got variety in spades. Some of the stuff is exactly what I'd expect to see in a Dungeons & Dragons game, and other stuff rivals Dark Souls or even the most bizarre offerings from the Elder Scrolls. So from a fashion core or roleplay perspective, the freedom of how you look is intense. And it's not all about fashion. The armor, of course, also plays its core function of keeping you safe. So it is a game where you may find yourself wearing an item just for the stats, and that can often lead to some hilarious outfits. Some other things that have been added since the last time I took a look at this game are a new and revamped character creation system, which allows you to really customize the way your character looks, and upgraded crafting systems, including alchemy and blacksmithing. Both of these existed in the past, but they've been really fleshed out with a lot more stuff you can do with them, and that really improves the roleplay potential, in my opinion. New RPG systems, including sketchbooks, farming, a character house, and even a pet, so all of that's new. Last time I played this game, you could not farm, there was no way for you to get your own house, and there certainly was not a pet system, and now it has all of those. Apparently it also has a romance system. I've not interacted with this yet, but that's an exciting change, something that people generally like to have in their RPGs these days. They have a built-in photo mode. It's got unique guilds with their own quest lines, so that's also new. And just overall a lot more content, characters, quests, and unique encounters that make the game feel so much bigger and full of life. And of course, kind of backpedaling a bit to narrative, the narrative of the game is a branching storyline. So what you do, what you say, the choices you make will alter the outcome of the game. And this starts early, as there is lots of dialogue that maybe should not be said, but you have the freedom to say it. There are also characters that you can miss entirely depending on how you choose to do things, and they will dramatically alter the course of the game's story. I obviously have not finished the story, as the current piece I have access to is only Act 1, but from what experimentation I have done, the game actually has quite a bit of narrative freedom, and I look forward to exploring what things change based on what I do and say while playing it. In a nutshell, this game is filling a niche that the rest of the gaming industry seems to be ignoring. Bethesda is clearly going to wait until we are all old and gray before releasing the Elder Scrolls 6, so most of us have stopped holding our breath. And the other companies who were supposed to be making their own Skyrim killers, like Obsidian, with Avowed, have totally fumbled and dropped the ball hard. But here comes an indie studio that just wants to make a good game, and in my opinion, they have succeeded. So I'll have links in the description for some trailers for this game that they just released, and also a link or two where you can buy the game if you're interested. Again, the game is currently available in early access, and the current version is only Act 1 of the game, but it is the full Act 1 experience. The story, characters, skills, and everything else that will be available in the final release of the game in Act 1 is currently available. So if you want something to play right now, that is what they have. However, if you want to wait for the full release, I certainly would not blame you. And so you can wishlist the game on Steam, and it should be released within the second quarter of 2025. So the wait won't be too terrible. And that's where we're going to end it for today. Personally, I'm a fan of this game. It's unapologetically a game for classic RPG gamers, and it fills a niche that most of the gaming industry has clearly moved on from at this point. It's detailed, handcrafted, and offers tremendous amounts of player freedom, all while fitting inside a fairly tight and cohesive narrative. Is it super polished like a AAA game in 2025? No, but neither are they. But it also, at least, succeeds in being a game that you can tell was designed by gamers for gamers, not by a committee or a corporate board for an audience that they wish existed. But in any case, thanks for watching, and have a nice day, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching another Dare to Game video. If you like this video, please leave a like and a comment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like my content and would like to support this channel, consider becoming a member today for as little as $1.99 a month. It makes a huge difference. But in any case, thanks for watching and have a nice day. I'll see you next time.